Alright, what up guys? Today we'll be repairing not one, not two, but 5 mail-in iPod repairs. So all these iPods were iPods that were sent in through customers on my website just to get me to fix. And today we will just be fixing all of these in one big video showing the full process. A couple of them are getting Bluetooth added as well. So yeah, let's get straight into it. We will start off with one of the Bluetooth iPod Classic 5th gens. Alright, this one will be getting a Bluetooth mod, 256 gig iFlash SD card, a new front plate, new click wheel, and yeah, we're just changing out all the parts as well for some new colors. So first things first, let's plug it in and see what condition it's in right now. It is powering on, so the battery still works, although we do have some dead pixels. So the customer hasn't paid for a screen replacement, but I probably will just end up replacing the screen anyways. You can actually get these dead pixels out just by using a plastic tool and then just pushing them out. Let's just test the rest of the functionality quickly before we get into opening it up. So headphone jack, button, lock switch, all that stuff. This customer hasn't asked us to transfer his music over, but that is something we can do as well if you would like. Just add it to the buyer notes at checkout and I can back up your iPod and copy over the music. Alright, so let's start by disassembling the iPod. Have this here to put any screws down and stuff. So first things first, let's get this apart. It's much easier on the iPod Classic 5th gens compared to the 6th and 7th gens. Sort of just pops open. Now we're going to undo the battery connector, and this is by far the most fragile part on the iPod Classic 5th, 6th and 7th gens. So you just want to use a small pair of tweezers and be really gentle with it. See that motion there? It's just very subtle. If you bend it off, if you do like that, you're going to end up prying the whole connector off the logic board. And then you need to be very good at soldering to get that back on. I do have a tutorial if you do break it off though, which you can watch on my channel here. Now we can remove those 2 bits of rubber and we can unclip this hard drive. And we'll put this off to the side here. Now we can undo this. This is the headphone jack flex, and we'll put this back part off to the side for now, and we'll do his front plate and stuff first. So what are we going to do? We're going to do a white front plate, white button, a black click wheel, and I'll replace his LCD while we're at it. Alright, so first things first, we've got to unscrew the old front plate here. But before we do that, we've got to disconnect the LCD flex. Just be very careful with it. Alright, now undoing these screws. Just 6 screws along the side here. Yeah, I'm just placing these down on the mat. Although all the screws that's used in the iPod Classic 5th gen are all exactly the same size, so it doesn't really matter if you mix any of these up. Even the screws back here, and the screws, these are technically a different coloured screw, but they all have the same threading, and it won't really matter if you actually mix these up. Alright, let's pop this open. Can be a bit stuck down, I think. There's a bit of adhesive right at the top here. Well, there's something we'll have to fix as well. You see this foam pad here? That is starting to shift out of the way. Now, from memory, when I was testing this, that button was still clicking properly. But if that foam pad shifts too much out of the way, what can happen is this center button can just stop being able to be pressed in. So the way you fix that is you can just grab this and place it back in the center there. This one still has a good amount of adhesive on it still, but if you feel that the adhesive is not holding up, you can apply some new adhesive. Alright, now this logic board is just glued onto this frame here. The classic 6th and 7th gens do have 2 screws right here holding it on, but the 5th gen it's just held on with double-sided adhesive. So what I like to do to weaken the adhesive is just grab some alcohol and we'll just spray the back here. Yeah, because you don't want to flex this logic board too much when you see how easy that's come off now. They can be on there kind of firmly from the factory, so you don't want to bend the logic board at all, obviously. Alright, now we can disconnect our old buttons here. Being very careful with this. I have seen people rip this connector off the board before, so just very carefully disconnect it. And these buttons are sort of adhered down back here as well, so you're going to want to peel up this connector a little bit like that before removing it. And now we can just put this over to the side. Pretty much all the parts on this iPod are getting replaced. So here's our new black click wheel. make sure it is a 5th gen one. The difference between the 5th gen and the 6th and 7th gen one, well, they won't work with each other, obviously. It's a different part. But the way you can tell is just through this little thing that sticks out down here. Alright, now we can plug that in. Now, as you can see, this also has a, you can pull this up. And there's some extra adhesive underneath. So let's plug this in now. And just shut that connector. Alright, here's our new home button as well. Not home button, center button. Just place that in the middle. Sometimes this can be a bit fiddly when you're going to seal this thing back up. The center button can easily fall out. Something you can do is just grab a bit of Captain tape here. Just grab a small piece. That'll keep it in place while we go to seal it back up. Now we can grab this and adhere it down onto the frame. Don't need to add any more adhesive. It should be good as it is. Yeah, so let's just take our new LCD and install it in our new front plate. This is probably the hardest part of this, is getting this on here without getting any dust in the way, which is easier said than done, to be honest. So yeah, let's have a go at this now. Let's lift up this first. Chuck that out. I'll hold this LCD like this. Grab this protective cover. I won't fully remove it yet, I'll just let it sit there. And then quickly I will remove this whilst facing the LCD down. Grab this out of the way and go in as quick as you can. Alright, now flipping it around, did we get anything? Oh, there is a bit of glue up there. There's a couple of things in the way there. Yeah, so we got, it's like 2 little bits and a tiny hair at the top. We might be able to get all this out just with the use of a little cotton bud and a tiny bit of alcohol. Let's try this. Peel this up here, hold it like this. Gently try to go in here and get these things. Got that one. Alright, there we go. I've battled with that off camera for another 20 minutes and now I've got it into a state where I'm happy with it. So we will now reassemble this iPod. Let's go ahead and put the logic board back in. Alright, just screw that down now as well. Let's get this screwed in here. Yeah, sometimes these aftermarket parts don't fit 100%. As they would have out of the box. It's worth keeping that in mind. Yeah, another thing I noticed with this aftermarket LCD is it didn't have any covering over all of these components here. Whereas if you look at the one that came on the iPod, you'll notice it had a bit of tape under there. And I kind of want to cover that up because those components will be sitting directly on top of this metal piece here. So as to not cause any short circuits, what I'm going to do is just grab some of this Captain tape. I'm going to put this in the description as well. And we'll just place this here. Don't want to get it over that connector, obviously. Yeah, just placing that down there like that. I'll give this a little bit of a chop here. There we go. And that should be all good. Now let's plug this back in. Seal this. Put this connector back down. Alright, and that's the front half of the iPod done. And that took way too long, mostly because we were just trying to fight with the dust. So now just placing this off to the side for now, and we will get working on our Bluetooth. Yeah, so the customer also wanted us to install Bluetooth and a new slim rear housing. Although I have these already made up with the Bluetooth chip pre-installed. So I'll just be installing one of these today. If you want to see the full process of how to install Bluetooth in an iPod Classic 5th, 6th or 7th gen, you can click this tutorial up here and I'll show you the full process of soldering in this little Bluetooth board. But the one we use is called the KCX BT emitter board. And as you can see, we just solder it into the bottom of the headphone jack there. We still have to wire in our 3000 milliamp hour battery in this as well. So yeah, let's do that now. First fold back our protective coating. Alright, another thing I like to do when I install these in the customer's iPods, I like to chop off this built-in antenna because we will be adding an additional antenna later on. So for now, let's cut this off. You can do this just with a pair of scissors. Just make sure you're not gonna break any of the wires. So get all these out of the way. And there we go. Alright, and here is our 3000 milliamp hour battery. And so what we have to do now is just solder these two wires up to the battery. So let's move over to the soldering iron now, and I will show you how to install that. Alright, so to solder in this battery, all we got to do is peel back the BMS on the 3000 milliamp hour battery cell to expose the solder joints. And then we can apply some flux and add some more solder, and then just soldering our red wire to the positive and black wire to the negative. And now just reassembling that battery, making sure the wires are tucked in there nicely, and we'll wrap some more Captain tape around it. Now we can connect this back half up to the front. But before we do that, actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to install our additional antenna. Alright, so what we want to do to install our additional antenna is we want to line up our rear housing and our front plate exactly, and then just look at this gap here between the headphone jack and the lock switch. As you can see, our Bluetooth board fits in there pretty much perfectly, like that. So that's where we want to tape it on this side. We just want a tiny little bit of double-sided tape here to get this down. So I'll just apply some to the flat side on our antenna here. Alright, let's just place this right here. You want to make sure it doesn't sit on top of this headphone jack as well, because that can cause a bit of an issue. Might have to move it over a bit here. Alright, that should be all good. Now let's connect the back and the front back together. First things first, we'll plug in our headphone jack. Thought I saw something on the end of the headphone jack there, but it should be all good. Alright, now for our storage. So in this one we will be putting an iFlash quad and a 256GB micro SD card. So let's do that now. Here we have our iFlash quad adapter. Today we'll be using a Samsung Evo Plus 256GB micro SD card. So let's plug this in here. Alright. Also like to adhere this down a little bit as well. So to do that, we'll first grab a little bit of Captain tape. Oop, it's a bit too much. And just place that over here. Get a couple of different pieces. Now what we can do is grab some of our double-sided tape and put that on top. And there we go. Now another thing I like to do is bend this connector forward a little bit like this, because sometimes this battery can sandwich it down, and if it squishes it in a bad angle it can damage it, and then we'll have to redo it. So now let's plug in our antenna. Get all the wires into a good position up here. Grab our antenna and clip that into the board. It's also a good idea to put some folds in this wire so that it'll all go back in properly and won't get in the way. Alright, now let's plug in our battery. Clip that in. Now we can seal the iPod back up. So you want to make sure all these wires are sort of not going to be sandwiched in there. Especially the antenna wire, that's a bit thicker. You want to also make sure that they don't get caught between the side of the clips here and the side of the iPod itself. So once you've got all your wires in a good position, make sure the battery is sitting in the right position. If it sits on top of this, it will not be that good for the battery itself. Alright, now sealing this all shut here. Why is it not clipping? Oh, there we go. Just have to give it a bit of a push. And there we go. This should be all working now. Oh, we do have a bit of a pressure point here, as you can see, so we have to open that up and see what's causing that. It's probably just some wires. Another thing, I've forgotten to install our little bit of plastic at the bottom. Alright, let's do both of those things. Let's grab our little bottom plastic off this iPod here. We'll transplant this over. There we go. That's actually pretty easy to crack while screwing it in, so just be careful with it. Yeah, and the reason we had a pressure point is because all these wires were sitting on top of this area. Now let's do the battery. We should be good to go. Chuck all the wires in here. I'll seal it back up for the freaking 7th time. Make sure it's all clipped in properly. Alright, so now, obviously that came up with the Restore with iTunes screen, which is normal when you put in a SD card. So now let's just plug this into the computer and do a full restore with iTunes, and then we can test it out. Alright, now I've finished restoring that and I've loaded some music on. Let's give it a test. Bluetooth should connect automatically. There we go. Let's see. Alright, I'm going to test the sound out. Yep, Bluetooth's working properly. Let's give it a range test. Yep, it's getting good range with that antenna placement. It's going all the way to the other room, so yeah, pretty good. Alright, now let's just give this a little final wipe down. And we'll plug it in the charge and it should be good to go. Yep, sweet, headphone jack's working fine. Take this back plastic off and we'll just give it a bit of a wipe. I'm going to leave the front plastic on. Customer can peel that themselves. Right, now what I would do is just plug this in and leave it to charge. And let's move on to our next device here. What are we going to do next? Let's mix it up a little bit. Let's do our red iPod Nano 7th Gen. Alright, put that off to the side. I think somebody's already attempted to open this up because our antenna cover is off. So let's see what happens when we plug it in via USB, see if it charges up at all. Because that'll give us an indication of whether it's just a battery or if it's a logic board issue as well. Yeah, so this iPod is actually working on the computer. Just it powers off the second you unplug it, so it is just a faulty battery on this. Let's get the screw out. One of these little ones. Alright, let's get these screws out. Be careful not to strip these two screws, because these are pretty easy to strip. Might be more appropriate to use a finer tip for this. If you are using an electric screwdriver, you want to sort of get it started manually. And then you can just pull it out quickly like that. Alright. Now the screen is still intact on this model, so we want to be a bit more careful when trying to take this off. Yeah, what we want to do is we want to grab one of these, a little suction cup thing. Another good thing to do is apply some heat with a hot area workstation or something. If you don't have one of those, you could also use just a hairdryer and just heat up the front. It's mostly under this bezel part here. There is a bit of adhesive holding it down. And I've just noticed there is a small chip on this right there. So I want to be careful of that because that could turn into a huge crack and then we'll have to replace the whole front glass. Which I'm pretty sure, I'll just double check that they haven't. Yeah, they've only gone for a battery replacement, so we'll just replace the battery. See, as I'm lifting it up, it is starting to pull up from the side, but it's really down here. And I'll show you how it comes apart. Alright, we've got it to lift up a little bit here. Slowly make our way around. Now there are some very, very fragile flex cables on this model underneath that you've got to be very careful of. And there's also a metal frame that attaches to this digitizer here that we want to unclip. And the best way to do that is with a box cutter blade, but you want to be very careful because you can easily scratch stuff when trying to use it. Just using my fingernail here. Alright, there we go. Again, the reason I use this opposed to a plastic tool is because no plastic tool's getting in there. Look how thick this is compared to this. You're not getting it out with this thing. You're gonna have to do a bit of prying with the metal tool, but that's gonna require some good precision because you can easily slip and scratch. Alright, here we go. And there we have it. Oh, as you can see, our battery has started all. I'll unclip the digitizer and we'll take a bit of a better look. Yeah, again, you got to be very careful with all the flex cables in here. Use a plastic tool and disconnect both the LCD and the digitizer. There it is. Alright, and now what I also like to do at this stage, you see the battery connector right there and it's still soldered on. I find it easier if we just snip this with the scissors. Alright, and now we can easily take this off because this is adhered down on here on the back. So it technically has this pull tab that never does anything. So what I like to do instead is grab the iPod opening tool, and we can usually pry it off a bit easier with this. Be careful of the LCD flex that you can see is running underneath it. Be careful not to push too hard as well because you can end up damaging the LCD from behind. Right, here we go. We can just pry this up and off now. And that's our pathetic pull tab that doesn't do anything. We can just take this battery and chuck it in the bin. But as you can see, it started like all corroding and everything down here. It's probably even started mixing with the red anodizing, hence why it's all red. Chuck that in the bin. Not the actual bin, your battery bin. I have a box of batteries which I drop off at the tip every sort of year or so. Alright, so we can put this LCD assembly off to the side as well. Just put it on my little tray over here. My little mat. Now let's take this over to the soldering iron and we'll install our new battery. And here's our new battery over here. As you can see, it looks pretty much identical to the old one. Alright, so as you can see, there's all this like, I don't know what this is actually called. It's like a rubbery type of protective coating over the battery connection. So you want to remove that first, just using the tweezers, and just scrape it away. And that will reveal our solder pads. So first things first, we want to grab some of this flux paste, and we will just flood the battery connector with flux. And now we will turn on our fan, grab our soldering iron, and we will remove this battery connector here. Alright, so that fan was way too loud, so I thought I'd just record a voiceover after the fact here. So first just desoldering this old flex cable, and now we got to clean up this whole area a little bit. As you can see, that old battery had corroded so much that it started eating at the metal there. So we got to clean that all up just using isopropyl alcohol and a cotton bud here. And then cleaning all the old flux and gunk off the battery connector as well. Alright, now we can grab our new battery and line up the pads on the ribbon flex with the pads on the logic board. Apply some flux, and now just use our soldering iron to solder it in. And now I like to add a little bit of extra solder to all those pads as well. And there we go, our battery is now in. Before we get the screen on, I'm just going to wipe out some of this old adhesive down here. Alright, now just to install the LCD. Might put some Captain tape over those joints to ensure it doesn't short out on the back of the LCD here. Alright, let's try this. And there we go. Power's on. And the touch is still functioning. Very nice. Test all the buttons. We'll test the headphone jack as well before getting it sealed up. Alright, now let's get this all back together. So make sure the battery is sitting in the right spot, and then we'll tuck this screen back in. It sort of sits underneath this part here. And then you also, it's a good idea to add a little bit more adhesive along the bottom, because there was some there originally that we wiped away. So what I'm doing is I'm just getting some B7000 glue, putting it in the spots where it was originally. Not very much. The glue's more of a secondary thing. You could even skip it and it'll still work perfectly fine. Alright, let's clip it in along the sides here. Yeah, we'll get our screws back in. Here's our screwdriver. We got these two bottom ones first, so make sure the holes line up. Now doing this last screw. Alright, now what we have to do is just glue this back on. So in order to do that, we've got to make sure the area is completely clean. So that means scraping off all the old glue. Give it a wipe down with alcohol as well. Same goes with the plastic piece. Make sure this doesn't have any glue on it. Make sure it's dry as well. Alright, and now we'll just grab some B7000 and apply it to the bottom here. You can use quite a bit. It'll most likely seep out the sides when we go to get this plastic part adhered. Alright, let's go. Now we grab this, hold it in place for a little bit. Yeah, this glue doesn't dry instantly. It takes sort of like 24 hours to get properly hardened, and then it probably continues to dry for even longer than that. So what we want to do in that time, as you can see, as I've let go of it, it's already started slipping down. So we're going to want to hold this in place while it dries, and to do that, what I usually do is just grab a rubber band like this, and then we just wrap it around. Alright, and that'll be holding that in place while it dries. And once it's fully dried, we can just give it a wipe down of all the excess glue, and that'll be good to go. So this iPod is now fixed as well. On to our next one. Alright, let's have a go at this. This is an iPod Classic 3rd Gen. So let's see what we're doing on this one here today. Alright, so the customer wants a new battery, as well as a 128GB SD card. So let's have a go at this. Now the thing to note about the iPod Classic 3rd Gens is that they don't charge over USB. They can only receive a charge via Firewire. So for my initial test, I'll have to grab a Firewire charging brick and plug it in and just see if it all works. Alright, so after plugging this one in and leaving it to charge for a bit, as you can see it just sits on the Apple logo. So this could either be a bad hard drive or it could even be a faulty logic board. There's only one way to find out though. Let's just bust it open and have a look. Alright, so again, I like to take these apart using the box cutter blade. Again, the dull box cutter blade. You can't cut yourself with this. It's actually easier to cut yourself with one of these. If you hold it and grip it at the sides and push down, you're going to cut the side of your hands. With this thing, you're not going to cut yourself because it's dull. Alright, so let's get this open. You want to make sure you don't slip here as well, because you don't want to scratch anything. Alright, so that's... there we go. The clips on these are much bigger than the 5th gen, so it's a bit easier to open, I think. A bit less fragile. Alright, let's open this up now. First we've got to disconnect the headphone jack and lock switch assembly here. Put that off to the side. Now we can disconnect our hard drive and battery. This thing is still spinning, so there's no real way to power this off before this stage. There we go. Most likely had a faulty hard drive, but we'll have to find out. This flex cable does disconnect from the logic board, just like this. As you can see, the connectors on these older iPods were a lot more substantial and less fragile as well. Alright, now to get this battery out, as you can see, it sort of runs underneath the logic board. We might actually be able to get this out. It's probably better to just unscrew the logic board to be safe, so we don't accidentally cause any damage. But maybe you could get this out without... oh yeah, no, looks like we can just bring these wires around the side here. Yeah, we don't have to take the logic board out, which we usually do on the 4th gen. But the 3rd gen's a bit different, I guess. Alright, now let's take this and dispose of this safely. Now this is all the extra hardware we'll be installing here today. For the battery, we just have a standard sized one. You could put a thicker battery, like a 3000 mAh battery, in the thicker version of this iPod, but since this is the slim one, I'm pretty sure we won't have enough space to fit anything extra. We'll see though. We'll just do the standard one for today though, I think. So just plug that in like that and squeeze it into place. Alright, now when it comes to upgrading the hard drives in these things, what we will need to do is get one of these mini IDE to CF adapters, and we will also need either just a compact flash card, or in this case what we're using is a compact flash to SD card adapter, and then we will be putting our micro SD card in that. So yeah, but before we do that, there's a couple other things we need to prepare. As you can see, this adapter has these two little pins here. I think this is just called a master slave jumper or something. So we want to leave it in the closed position so that it can be the master drive. But something else we want to do is, you see these two little pins? They stick out, and when we seal this back up, they can press down on the battery area here. So what we want to do, we just want to shave these down a little bit. Let's put this off to the side. And then I would also get my file out. So just shave them down till they're flush. There we go. Wiping out any extra shavings. You don't want the shavings getting inside the iPod. And when you're shaving it down as well, also make sure you don't shave the trace off of the board, because of course that can cause some issues. Right, now let's take our 128GB micro SD card, put that into our SD card adapter, then into our CF card adapter, and now into our IDE adapter. So we want to use a bit of tape to keep this all in place as well. So I like to put one along here. I have actually had one of these fall out before after sealing the iPod back up, so now I always make sure it's taped down into position as well. And another bit of Captain tape over that connector we shaved down. Alright, this is now ready to be installed in the iPod. Let's bring this back out here, and let's take this blue thing off. We don't really need this anymore. Peel it off from here. And oh yeah, as you can see, this connector has one of these little plastic pins which will stop this from being inserted, but we have to get rid of that obviously. So just chop it off. Now we can plug this in. Now plugging that into our logic board. Alright, and we will also be installing some foam here to make sure it doesn't wobble around. But before we do that, I want to just give this a little bit of a test, because I'm still not sure if this logic board's all good. Might have to plug it into the charger. Alright, and it was coming up with our file symbol there, so this should be good to be restored within iTunes. Just plug it into the computer now. Yep, it's coming up in disk mode. Alright, now I've just restored that with iTunes. Let's reboot the device. Let's see if we get the correct screen here. Should say the show a picture of the charging port. There we go. I'll plug this into our Firewire charging cable. Alright, so we've successfully restored it. Let's just give it all a bit of a test here. Settings, let's turn the backlight on. As you can see, we've got those LEDs lighting up. Let's check that our storage is all there. 115 gigs, it's all good. Let's put some music on it and we'll give the audio a test. Alright, let's just give it a test here. Alright, all good. So now let's just put some foam down and we'll seal this thing back up. Let's get this out again. Yeah, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab a bit of this packaging foam. I think I'll put it underneath. You put it on top as well, but I might end up adhering this down so it's all sitting there in place. Yeah, I think I'll go like that, and then I'll use some double-sided tape so that all of that can be fixed and sitting in place. Just make sure it's not going to be too thick. Should be all good. Grab some Captain tape, place this down here. Alright, that's all sitting nicely in place now. And let's just seal this back up. It should also, now with this foam, it should also be more sitting up against the back of this. And it will sort of compress and all stay in place as well. On top of the double-sided tape. So, another thing you want to do on this model, make sure when you're sealing this back up that this and this switch are in the same position. So I currently have it in the lock position, but if you were to slam it shut when it's like that, what can happen is you can actually snap that little black plastic nub off of the logic board, and then you'll have to resolder that. So yeah, you want to make sure that you're doing that part properly. Let's get it all back together now. There we go. And there we have it. Our 128GB iPod Classic 3rd Gen. So I will just plug this in on the Firewire charger now and let this charge up all the way to full. Anyways, alright, now on to device number 4, this pink iPod Nano. Now this iPod Nano is going to be a bit different. As you can see now, it's got white plastic accents at the top and bottom and on the buttons. But on this one, we're going to be switching those out for black. So let's plug this in and just see if it works. Does not appear to be powering up right now. Might have to get a new battery in this just to see if it actually wants to power on. Saw something flickering. I think it's just really flat. Alright. Let's open this up now. So to get into this, we've got to take off both the top and bottom plastics first. Alright. Now we've got to undo some of these screws here. So we got 3 on the bottom. And once we remove that little metal piece, this one here, you can now take the buttons out, which these just pop out from underneath as well. If you just grab the tweezers, you can see there's a little gap there. Just slot your tweezers in there and then push up and you'll click the buttons straight out like that. You can unclip those as well, just a little flex cable there. Lift out this little plastic piece here as well. And there's a spring that goes with it. Alright, now we can remove the top buttons. The top screws. And all the screws on this model are in at a bit of a 45-degree angle, which is pretty confusing the first time because it's not obvious that they are. Once you got these off, we can remove this top plate, which is attached to the lock switch flex cable, which is by far the most fragile part on this entire iPod. So you gotta be very careful with this area here, because if you slip, you can very easily rip this little thing off. Now we just gotta get off the camera, which I like to do by first just applying a bunch of alcohol on top of it to sort of weaken up that adhesive. Then you just grab a little pin, shove it in there in the microphone port, and then we can sort of pry this off like this. There you go. Yeah, this little bit of plastic can just pull straight up like that as well. Alright, now this thing, front glass, I would just use one of these suction cup thingies, and this one's come up very easily, so nothing to worry about there. Alright, now before we slide the internals out of the iPod, it's worth keeping in mind that there is a bit of adhesive behind the battery, which we will have to break before we slide this thing out. So in order to do that, I would first make sure this flex cable is out of the way. You can grab one of these metal pry tools. I'd make sure to get one that's very straight and not bent at the end. Like if you see this one here, it's got a massive kink at the bottom of it. If you shove that in, you have a high chance of cracking the screen, so I'll just find one that's very straight here. Here's a good one. And now before we actually do it, I will just spray some alcohol on this as well, which will help to weaken the adhesive. And now we can grab this and shove it in the back here. Again, you gotta watch for the lock switch flex cable when you're doing this, because you can accidentally crush it. Alright, there we go. I hope that cable is okay. I can fix it if we have broken it, but ideally you just don't break it in the first place. Now we can sort of slide this out just by moving it a bit. Once we get it down far enough, we can start pushing from the top as well. Not sure why this one feels a lot more firm than usual. Don't know what's blocking it. Alright, now we can move this down a bit and keep wiggling it out the bottom. Alright, now let's inspect this lock switch flex cable to see if it's all still good, and it looks alright. Perhaps the battery was ever so slightly expanded on this model. Might have been why we were having trouble getting it out. Now what we can do is just lift this up here and peel this flex cable back. And here are the solder joints for the battery. I've just got to remove this bit of Captain tape, and now that has been revealed. Now over to the soldering iron to remove this battery. So to desolder it, all we got to do here is first apply some flux. That'll just make the solder flow a whole lot better. And now we grab our soldering iron and our solder, and we'll just add some extra solder to all of the pads here, And then you want to move it back and forward and make sure you're heating all of the pads at once, and then you can slide the battery just off to the side there. And now you don't want to use any pressure when you're doing that, because you can rip the pads off of the logic board, and if you do that, well, then the whole logic board's pretty much cooked and you'll have to just buy a new one. So yeah, you want to make sure you're taking care when you're removing the old battery. And now just grabbing our new battery, and as you can see, I like to remove the sticker there as well. It'll just give us an extra millimeter of space, which doesn't sound like much, but in an iPod like this, there's just not that much space at all, so every little extra millimeter counts. It'll make it easier to reassemble it. Alright, and now we're just soldering in our new battery. And then once that's in, just use a cotton bud with some alcohol to wipe up all of the excess flux, and really make sure you don't get any behind the backlight here on the LCD, because that can leave a big watermark. So yeah, try not to damage the LCD there. Yeah, you want to make sure you got that flex cable for this thing in the right sort of spot. It's supposed to sit under the battery here like this. I might actually plug this in and see if we get an Apple logo before I try reassembling it though, because I didn't see it power on before. This LCD is sketchy. Oh yeah, the customer has paid for a screen replacement on this one as well. So that's what the screen looks like at the moment. It's just not looking great. So I will go and grab another LCD. Alright, here's one that we can try. Yeah, so the LCDs for the iPod Nano 5th Gen have recently stopped being produced, I'm pretty sure, because I'm not able to find them anywhere, and none of the other iPod stores have them in stock either. So I think our best bet for these LCDs now is to literally just pull them from other used devices that have good LCDs, unfortunately. Alright, this iPod has a good LCD, so we'll just pull this one from here. Alright, so to get out this old LCD, it's just adhered on here. It's kind of easy to crack, so you do want to be careful. Although this one's already broken anyways, so it's not that big of a deal if we do crack it. This is the point where you're most likely to crack it, when it's still adhered down here, because it uses the most adhesive at the bottom. So what I like to do is just grab a plastic pry tool and sort of work your way through the sides. This tool's not sharp enough. It'd be better if we had a brand new one. But anyways, there you go. Alright, now let's put in our new LCD. Yeah, don't worry about that. That's just because we haven't restarted it yet. That artifacting and stuff can sometimes happen when you plug a screen in while the iPod's still powered on. Although if we restart this, you should see here that the screen goes back to normal. Yeah, as you can see there, our screen is working normally now. Although these buttons aren't very clicky. Although that's alright, because we'll be replacing them anyways. The customer said they wanted black buttons. So what we're going to do is we're going to transplant this pink onto one of these black click wheels. But we've got to find a good one. Try and find one that's not very scratched up. This one looks like good condition. Nice. Alright, we'll go with this. Now what we want to do here is switch out this for this. Alright, so there's our old little button there. Now let's grab the one from this pink one. Alright, and there we go. We might have to wait for the alcohol to sort of start drying up a bit before that actually sticks properly. But yeah. Looks pretty cool though. Pink and black. Now let's get this thing reassembled, which is the most time consuming part of the iPod Nano 5th Gen. Now the iPod Nano 5th Gen gets a bad rap for being the hardest iPod to fix, and it is somewhat deserved, because it is pretty complicated. There's a lot of different steps, but I actually sort of prefer this design to the Nano 4th Gen. I think it's a big improvement, because a lot of the parts just go together a lot easier. It doesn't have those flex cables that's like infused into the PCB. I think it's called a rigid flex PCB when it's like that. And when I looked into PCB design, it uses proper connectors and stuff, which just makes things a lot easier to fix in comparison. But it is more time consuming because gluing all those parts back on takes a long time. On the Nano 4 it's only the top and bottom plastics, but on the Nano 5 you've got the front glass and the camera cover to worry about as well. So there's just more steps. Alright, let's slide this back together here. Put this in first. You do want to be careful when sliding this in. There's some flex cables that can break. Most notably, the LCD flex cable can get caught on these little lips where the buttons sit. And also this speaker flex cable at the back can get caught in here. So you want to avoid all that, obviously. Move it in slowly. Alright. Now as soon as we get it in, there is one screw we got to put in first. Now let's bring these out. I like to get the headphone jack screw in first, just so the whole logic board can be secured back into the frame. This one will sort of hold everything in temporarily until we get the rest of them in. Look, if you don't put that screw in and then you plug it in to the charging port just to test it, and you see that everything's all good, and then you go to rip the charging port out, you can pull the internals out as well and then cause a bit of damage. It's happened a handful of times in the past, so you gotta get the screw in before you go testing things, I guess. Alright, now we can plug this in here. Actually, before we do, we'll get this black plastic thing back in. Doesn't really do much. It doesn't really matter if you accidentally forget this, but I'll put it back in there just for the sake of completeness. Yeah, and another thing I realised about this iPod recently, these little lips where the buttons sit up against, they actually have some adhesive from the factory, and what that does is it just helps the buttons stay flush. If you don't put this adhesive on, the buttons can sort of wobble around in there, which it's not a very big deal, it's an extremely minor detail, but once you notice it, it's just a good idea to put just a very small amount of B7000 glue on these little lips before you put the buttons back in. It'll just add a little bit extra completeness to your repair here, and will make it feel a bit more original still. So now let's plug these buttons in. Alright, nice. Alright, everything's clicking. Now let's put on this little bottom piece. Alright, there we go. Let's get this top bit back on so that we don't have the lock switch flapping around there waiting to snap off. Nice. Okay, our lock switch still works, which is very good. Now let's get our top and bottom plastics back on. And yeah, again, we're switching these out for some black ones here, so let me just find some good condition black ones. Alright, now we can re-adhere these. Now I like to do that these days using B7000. Just put on a small amount. You could also use the double-sided adhesive as well, but I find this can be a bit more secure. Alright, so just put on a decent amount and then put that down like that. Now these will take like probably up to 24 hours to fully dry, so I will be putting a rubber band around these as well, like we did on the Nano 7, and then leaving it overnight. And now this top part here, I like to give this a bit of a scrub down with the alcohol as well, just to get off any additional residues or adhesives. Just make the new stuff stick a whole lot better. Let's get a black lock switch out here as well. You can just put this over here. Alright, now applying some more of this. And there we go. Now we got our top plastic adhered down as well. We can start getting an idea of what this is going to look like with our black plastic instead of the white. Looks pretty cool, I think. But now let's get this back on. Back camera cover. Clean up some of the old adhesive again here. You don't want to use too much alcohol, as you can end up getting some behind the LCD if you do, so just a light amount, and you're giving this a rub. Alright, that is all clean. Now again, we want to apply some B7000 here. Alright, there we go. Now just adhering this down. Nice. Let's give this a wipe down. Alright, now we got to do this screen. So we'll clean off the old adhesive first. Spray it and then just give it a wipe. Just want to get all the old adhesive off because there's quite a bit of it. Let's apply some of this new adhesive now. Just got some of this 3M 1mm. Alright, now we are faced with this challenge again. Getting this onto here without getting any specks of dust in the way. Which is, again, much easier said than done. This is actually very aids and very time consuming. So get your microfiber cloth and give it a good wipe until you're satisfied. And this side as well. What I like to do is get the glass side pretty much perfect. And now you can start to peel these up. Leave this sitting here for a second. And now we have another go at this. And once we get this spotless, or as close to spotless as we possibly can, which is difficult. There it is. Alright, now let's get this on. And hopefully there's nothing underneath it. There's like 2 tiny hairs. But honestly, I don't think they're visible enough to warrant taking this back off. Actually, there's something massive in the corner. It's gonna have to come back off. There's something massive in there. Try again. What about that time? There we go. Now let's try the headphone jack. Alright, now all the functionality is working. You can just get this on the charger. As you can see, this one's pretty flat. So we'll just charge it up. Alright, let's get it plugged in. Alright, now we just have one more iPod to go. And this one is, I think, exactly the same build as what we did before. Literally, it's exactly the same build. Same faceplate, same buttons, same everything. Alright, let's get this done. So let's take this apart. The only difference is this is a thick version. Let's just open this up now. Obviously it comes apart the same way as the last iPod Classic. Just get your box cutter, go in the sides till it unclips. And there we go. Just shuffle that over to the side like that. Actually, we didn't test if this actually works, so we'll quickly just try and power it on. Yeah, it powers on. Still seems to all work. Doesn't have anything on it. It's probably one that the guy has just recently bought and then he's just sent it in straight away. Alright, let's get this old hard drive out. Put that off to the side. Yeah, as you can see, the hard drive in these ones is a bit thicker. Has this extra white piece of plastic. And the hard drive sort of comes up on top because it's a dual platter one in the thick versions. Disconnect that. Now we'll do our front plate first. So again, disconnecting the LCD. Let's remove these. Alright. Now same as last time. Spraying all this and pushing out our logic board. And the reason we have to take this out is just to get these buttons out. There's nothing wrong with these buttons, but the customer just wants new ones. So let's take this out, put those over to the side. There's our click wheel. Alright, and there we go. Alright, again, let's use a bit of Captain Tape to hold this in place while we reassemble it. Alright, grabbing this mid-frame and putting this back in. Alright, now remember last time how we had to cut this piece? I think that'll be appropriate here again, since we are going to be using all aftermarket parts in this build as well. If you're just using the stock parts, you won't have to cut this to get the pair button click function working properly, but with this all aftermarket part build, it's probably just a good idea. It doesn't harm the device at all to cut that. It'll still go together properly, still all the clips will be in place. So alright, now let's grab our new front plate, and now let's just hope and pray that this all goes in as smooth as possible. So I just want to get this lifted up here. Now we take this protective piece wherever we can get it. Alright, lift this all up. The white part didn't come up, that's alright. We could lift that, grab this screen and just bring it over quickly, and we hope that nothing got under the screen. Nothing there. Might grab that. Alright, that's about about as perfect as we're gonna get that. Okay. Now let's screw this back in. Alright. Now let's plug this in. And there we go, that's our front half completed for now. Take this off as well. Just put this off to the side. Alright, now for our Bluetooth backplate. Again, we'll just go with one of my pre-built ones. Again, if you want to see the full process, link to the video right here. But I just make these in bulk these days. Alright, there we go. Let's double check everything's correct. And we'll get our battery installed. Maybe we'll cut the antenna at this point as well. Just because now is a good time. I think I accidentally cut the black wire short, but we're going to have to cut it short anyways, so should be all good. Now over to the microscope. Now just grabbing our 3000 mAh battery and we'll put it in the same as we did before. Maybe I'll speed up this process just because it's all the exact same. Okay, so let's put our little bottom plastic piece in first. Got one from another iPod over here. You can't use the exact one that came with this because this was a thick version and the thick one's a bit different. So I have to pull one from another iPod. Oh yeah. Let's line up our antenna positioning first. Alright, now for our SD card. Again, we'll be using the iFlash Quad, which is the only one of these adapters that will fit in the slim version of this iPod. So we don't have a choice. Or only version that will fit in the slim version with the 3000 mAh battery, that is. Which obviously we would want to use a 3000 mAh battery, because that is the best one. Right, now in terms of our SD card, I have this Patriot ones, my last 256 gig SD card. So we'll just use this one. Patriot's a pretty decent brand and they go for a very good price on Amazon. Let's get this clipped in here. Okay, again let's do our Captain tape and double-sided tape thingy to get this adhered down. Okay, might give this a full test before we seal it back up this time, because that was a bit of a nightmare last time. Just assuming it was all going to work on the first try. How naive of me. Let's get this restored. Alright. Okay, now let's give this a test. It's connected to my phone. Okay, that all works. Yeah, it all sounds pretty good. So let's disconnect this here. Let's see. Now we just got to plug in the antenna and plug in our battery. And again, when we seal this back up, we just want to make sure all this stuff is out of the way. Sealing this back up and making sure we don't have any pressure points on our screen like we did last time. It's not a very common thing, but it happened last time, so I'll check for it again. That looks all good. Alright, now let's do a range test. And if it passes this range test, it'll be good to go. Mine usually auto pairs. Yeah, there we go. I didn't even have to press the button. Alright, let's quickly do a range test here. Alright, that definitely passes our range test. And this iPod is now done and ready to be sent back, along with all the other iPods we fixed today. Two classics that ended up being the exact same build, both with Bluetooth and 256GB SD cards. Then our 128GB iPod Classic 3rd Gen. Our pink iPod Nano 5, which has now been replaced with black accent colours. And our iPod Nano 7th Gen. Very nice. All of these are now ready to be sent back to the customer. So that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. See you next time, and bye.